Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Through the Fog, the show where we talk about how people found their way through all the chaos and the craziness. So today we have a friend of mine back on the show. He is Andrew Smith. So Andrew co-founded Yuppiechef in 2006 alongside Shane Dryden, one of my other friends, starting with zero capital, no formal business plan, and operating out of his lounge in Cape Town. Over the next 16 years, Andrew steered the technical and operational engine of one of South Africa's most beloved brands, pioneering everything from custom chaos warehousing systems to navigating high-stakes venture capital investments from New York's Tiger Global Management. And despite sweeping industry awards, Andrew privately recorded his intense battles with leadership fatigue and anxiety in daily notebooks. After leading Yuppiechef through a successful omni-channel evolution into brick and mortar retail and sustained profitability, he exited the business in 2022. He still lives in Cape Town, where he turned 20 years of daily journal entries into his debut book, Handwritten. In this episode, we dive deep into Andrew's process of translating or transcribing his 20 years worth of handwritten journals into a book and telling the story of Yuppiechef. It is a really emotional episode, and Andrew is very vulnerable and honest about the journey of being an entrepreneur. And this book has been profound. It's hit bestseller lists already, and it has changed people's lives. I have friends who've read it and saying that it's so fantastic to read about an entrepreneur and to be able to share that struggle. So this is my conversation with the incredible Andrew Smith. Hey, Andrew.
Hello, Pierre. Good to be
How
here.
you doing?
Good.
That's awesome,
again.
man. Thank you so much. You are the first person on the podcast to have a second episode. So it's a big deal. You must know that.
Was that because of popular demand and requests?
Because of popular demand. Because you wrote your first book. So when you write your first book, you get like a second episode. That's why. So that's the reason for everybody that's listening. That's the reason Andrew is on the podcast once again, because he has finally, after years and years and years, completed his memoir, his book. So the book is called Handwritten. We'll obviously link to it in the show notes. And Handwritten is the founding story and the story of Yuppiechef, which Andrew co-founded with Shane. And it's been my privilege to know both of you for the last, couple of years, and just sort of being a sort of a witness to the side of the sale and the now very well-known sale of Yuppiechef to Mr. Price, and so getting to know you and getting to know a little bit about the backstory. And it's really cool that you've written this down. So I know for those of you that don't know, but I know that you wrote this book by transcribing your journals, and you have kept journals since you were 18, right? So like
those are my
10
first
years
journals.
worth.
I mean, it's not every single day since I was 18, but although it does say that in the marketing blurbs about the book, because that's a better sell. There were times when I had some gaps, and frustratingly, times that were quite crucial in my journey, but my journey overlaps with young children and all sorts, and sometimes I was obviously under a bit of pressure. But yeah, every day I have written a journal, and I don't know why, but my current 20-year-old son who's currently 20, has also started writing in a journal, so maybe there's something in the genes.
Something in the genes.
To do that.
Could you share a little bit about that? It's your first book. So writing a book is a daunting process. It's, as Hemingway famously said, it's very easy to write a book. You just sit at a typewriter and bleed. It's pretty easy. But if you could share the process, or maybe a little bit more about that, what was it like to go back into those journals and to go and transcribe them? Or did you transcribe all of them first onto a computer and then you went back through all of them again? So just take us through that process.
Yeah, well, first to say that I'm not a writer, an author, any of those things. I write emails and I write WhatsApps like we all do. I think I was quite good at English when I was at school, but then most of us leave and don't do what we would consider, I guess, creative writing or writing full-length books or anything like that. And so during my time at Yuppiechef, as I guess we got more well known and the company was become a brand, people would say to me, "Oh, you should write a book about it." And I used to say, you don't at the halftime of the World Cup final in the change room when you got a bit of a lead and you say, "Oh, let's write a book about how we won the World Cup." You got to wait till the thing is finished before the story is really any good. So I put off that obviously for quite a long time. But then when the sale happened and it looked like we were going to be leaving Yuppiechef, I had an idea to write a book, but maybe in self-defense, I thought if it's just for me, if it sits on my shelf and maybe my family read it and my kids one day, that'll be fine. Let me just write something so that I've captured the story. And I had the journals and I don't have a very good memory. So I thought the journals would be a good source material for that. And I actually at one stage thought the book would take the form of like Diary of Adrian Mole, where it would almost be like a sort of diary that would what I wrote in the journals and then some filler bits in between. And so I started transcribing and Shane and I left Yuppiechef in August of 22. And quite soon after that, I kind of found my journals, box of journals, opened them up and started transcribing, like typing them out. Not every single word on every page. The part that weren't really relevant to what was going to become a public story, I didn't type that out. But I just started typing. And I realized quite soon that it wasn't going to be Diary of Adrian Mole in book format, because journals are not really well structured. They're interesting if you read someone else's journey, but they don't really follow a character arc. It's not the classic. There's a hero and he sets out on a quest and then he encounters a problem and then he finds a guide. The normal hero journeys. Real journals, like real life, are all over the show. Today, I have this great idea, and then tomorrow I go, I think that's a terrible idea. And then the next day, I think, oh, maybe it's not too bad. And then this good thing happens, and then that bad thing happens. And it's just happening all at once. And so if you just read that, it would be all over the show. And so I sort of knew that I was going to have to extract it from that into some sort of process. But it took a long time to write the journals. I think it took me about a year to transcribe 25 years worth of journals. And at the end of that, I had more than a book's worth of writing, and I gave it to a writing coach who I had seen, Kathy, and she read it in the January of, this must be 24. And she said, there's good content here. I mean, it's not a book, but there's some great content and there's some really vulnerable, open, honest thing. And I think you should start a story. And I was still deciding what format a book could be. And I remember reading Walter Isaacson talking about writing books, and he said you should write it chronologically. Stories start and end, and so I thought, well, let me do it like that. I'm not going to be clever with the timing, and I'm also definitely don't want to write a business manual or 12 steps to starting a startup. Like, I want to tell my story because that was always the intention. So 2024. Probably sometime in January, I have that scene where there's a blank Word document and the blinking cursor, and I just have to start somewhere. And I had the journals open on the left-hand side, which was 100, and other materials that I'd found and online articles and everything. And on the right-hand side, I had the blank document. And I pulled a little bit of a trick to get myself to write, because I didn't want to do it, I suppose. I didn't want to start committing to that. And Andrew Huberman had said that your first coffee of the day is the most powerful thing, most powerful coffee, not the most powerful thing, but certainly the most powerful coffee is the first one that you have in the day. And while you're drinking it, because of all the chemical things that happen in your brain, you have all these good feelings, but you don't necessarily associate the good feelings with the coffee you're drinking. You associate it with whatever. So if your first coffee, you're browsing Instagram, then you're telling your brain, wow, Instagram is a really good thing to do. And he says you should hijack that. Yeah. And whatever you really want to get done, do it with your first coffee. So, and also you probably shouldn't do it as you wake up. You should do it about an hour after you wake up. So I would drop my son at school and I would go to the Vita Cafe and use my Discovery Miles for my coffee. And I would be sipping my first cups of coffee in the day while I start typing. And even though those first days were really hard, it was amazing how that actually worked. And after a few days or weeks of that, I would wake up in the morning and go, oh, I get to go write my book today, because I think my body was really craving the coffee. And that worked. I couldn't do a lot of it. I probably only did an hour, maybe 2 hours in the day, because there was a lot of processing. The first, when I transcribed the journals, and that second year when I was turning them into the story, I was reliving these two and a half decades of my life, and my life that was filled with so much, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but so many foundational things, like getting married and having kids and starting a business and having no money and all these, and all the conflict and then COVID and so all of these things where I was processing them. And so I certainly, I couldn't do that all day, but I did it, and I set the goal of, the end of that year, 31st of December, I'm going to have got to the end of the book. So of course I logged it on a spreadsheet, because that's what I do, and calculated how many words a day I needed to write and what my trajectory was. And on the 31st of December, I hit print, and I printed out a book that was far, far too long. I think 145,000 words. So, massive thing, which I still have in the cupboard, completely unedited. And that was another thing I did when I was writing, was I had to train myself that, unlike an email or a WhatsApp, which we're pretty used to writing, when you hit send, you type the email and you hit send and it goes to the world. Whereas the way that I got around it when I was writing the book was to say, whatever I type right now probably won't be in the final book. That it's okay, just write it. And if you don't like how that sentence comes, it doesn't matter. Just keep on going. There'll be a lot more processing and editing later. And I think that got me over the initial hump. So I had these 140,000 words, and I took it back to Kathy and I said, here we go. Here's my book. And she read it, and she said, it's good, but it's far, far too long. So 2025 was the editing process, and most of that was cutting out. And it was interesting, in what I cut out was a lot of things that I'm glad I wrote down the first time, conflicts and things I was frustrated and angry about. I'm glad I went through that, putting them onto paper. But then when I was going through a second time, I thought that actually some of that has dissipated in me. I'm not as angry about it. I'm not as bitter about it. And it's actually not necessary for it to be in a book that the world's going to read. But that was a good sign of the processing that had happened. And I got the book all the way back down to a normal book length, which is about 90,000 words. And then the rest of 2025 was giving it to other readers to read, and editors near the end of the year. And then 2026, this year, was about the printing production process and going live. So it's been almost 4 years now of that process. As you said, I mean, that's a big chunk of the time I've known you, this book that's been in the background. And went live in, where are we now, in July? It went live in June, so just over a month ago to the world. So that's the sort of arc of the story of writing, but I guess we can jump into whatever is interesting from there.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. That's super awesome. I remember once, because we have, breakfast or lunch, maybe once every month, once every 2 months. And the one time you told me you used, was it Notebook or Gemini to critique the manuscript for you? And then it gave you some really interesting feedback.
Yeah.
What was it exactly? I can't quite recall.
So, I definitely recalled. The interesting thing with AI in my journey was that when I started writing in 2022, there was maybe ChatGPT was out, but there was pretty much no AI. And if there was AI, it had a very small context window. So you could only give it a small bit of content at a time. And we were all amazed when it could write us, a poem, but it certainly couldn't digest everything. And by the time I was finishing the book, you could give the entire Google Doc or Word document to one of these LLM models and ask it a question. And it was I'm really glad I didn't have it for the writing part, because I think that I would have been tempted to maybe shortcut, but it was really interesting. It was interesting in the kind of editing and reflecting stage, because you can ask a question out of this big book and get an answer in a few seconds, as if you're asking someone, please read this whole book and then and then tell me something. But you get to do it every few seconds. And so I would come up with ideas of, who are the characters in the books and that I haven't completed their own story arcs. Who did I introduce but I didn't finish? Or list all the characters and how I introduced them, so I can just review it and make sure see if I want to add more color to any of the introductions. So it's like having what even would you call that? Like a sort of a junior assistant with you, but they can just do it all so quickly. And so that was really interesting. And then at one stage, as the book was sort of nearing the end, I thought, well, I wonder what people will think about this. So let me ask AI. So I was sitting next to my son Jake at the time, and I said, hey, Gemini, imagine you are a reviewer who's reviewing this book and you didn't like it. What would you say about it? And Jake, before I hit enter, he's like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? I said, well, there's going to be people who don't like my book, so I'm just preparing myself. And Gemini came back And it said a whole bunch, but the line that stuck out is, "This book is full of privileged whining." And it was, what was so powerful about that was that if you want to wound me, that's probably the words you should use to wound me. It's so absolutely hit on the head. Part of my insecurities is that I'm trying to put this book out into the world to tell a real story about entrepreneurship, the struggles of bootstrapping something at the same time as having a young family, and all of the things that go in your brain while that's happening. You know, am I good enough? And have we picked the right path? And is this ever going to work? So I'm kind of putting that out there out of empathy. And yet I guess there's this sort of fear inside me, which is this coming across as whining? And it's the thing that the AI absolutely nailed. And then in order to resolve that slightly, I kind of started a new chat and I said, here's my book and here's a review that someone's written about it. Do you think the review is fair? And the AI, because I now hadn't told it to be critical, I was saying, it reviewed the review and it said, well, I don't think that review is fair. I think this person was looking for something that the book wasn't trying to give. It was, this person wanted this out of the book and you gave them something different, and it listed all the reasons for that. And that made me feel a bit better, because now that the book is in the wild, I have had some negative reviews. And that's been a useful sort of framing, is to say, well, if you approach any book with something that the author didn't intend, you're not going to like it. And that doesn't mean the book's wrong. Yeah. It just means it wasn't right for you in that time. It still hurts. Yeah. And I can't really remember the good things that people have said about the book, but I can quote almost word for word the negative reviews, because those are certainly the things that stick with us.
As I'm sure you know. That's super funny. Yeah, I found something the other day on Goodreads, and I don't go onto Goodreads often, and you can sort of create an author profile, and then all your books are sort of listed underneath your profile, and it sort of gets created automatically, and then they kind of group all your books together through the ISBN numbers or whatever, and then people comment on the books, and I didn't know this, and I went for my last book that came out, and I saw this comment from 2022 or somewhere. And the guy was so harsh. It was terrible. And he wrote this long review, but what he wrote was that this wasn't the book that he wanted. And I was like, well, I didn't choose to write that book. I wrote something else. I'm sorry. And I actually replied, because I feel so bad. I was like, well, I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't address these things in the book, but that's a different story. And it's a different, it's really funny how people are. But I think Jake was right in a way. Maybe why should you ask? I love that. It's freaking clever. So now that here's the book, everybody wants to see the book. So really, it's so nicely done. It's one of those books that self-published, which is interesting. Why did you choose to self-publish it? But it's one of those books that are self-published, but it doesn't feel like a self-published book that you buy at the back of a conference room. Feels really nice because Shane's hands were probably all over it, and that's why it looks really nice and cool as well. So now that it's out in the wild, what changed inside of you because of this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the majority of the change happened before it went into the wild. You know, even what I reflect at in the epilogue, when I'm kind of nearing the end of the writing journey and thinking about what has happened to me during the process of writing, and the reflections that I that were caused by other people asking me certain questions along the way, and being able to write that, and realizing that even though I initially wrote this with that sort of very self-defense of, it can just be for me. And then I thought, well, probably for me and the people who were very involved in the Yuppiechef story, and a few friends around. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe other entrepreneurs and some other people out there. And I let myself expand a little bit, well, maybe this will actually be good for the world to have in it. But I do think that the biggest impact was on me, more than any reader, more than will be for any reader to be impacted, is that it's been one of the biggest privileges in the last few years of my life, is that I am busy now. I'm involved in multiple businesses and other things, but I have been able to carve out the time to work on this book, which was a massive reflection on what you, I guess, call maybe the first half of my life, or the first half of my adult life. that to be able to reflect this deeply on it by going through in detail to what I was feeling on each day of the journey through my journals, and then transcribing that, which is just the literal, this is what I was feeling, but now trying to interpret it for the world, but then for myself. That process was quite I would say healing, because I do think that there was trauma. I mean, I think everyone has experiences trauma in whatever your life is. And it's not like only entrepreneurs experience trauma, or people who led through COVID, or, whatever it was that I experienced. It's not like it's unique to me, but my trauma was able to be processed in the writing of the book. And I think that was really powerful. But as it was coming to the time when it was go out into the world, I realized how honest and vulnerable this was. And then there was a lot of unknowns. I'm going to put it out into the world, and I'm going to meet people who are going to have read the book and know so much about me, and I won't know anything about them. And just what that means for, I think in most conversations, you sort of meet and you start at a bit of a shallow level, and how are you, and what do you do, and where did you grow up, and then you almost go deeper in the conversation step by step, in sync with each other. That's what a normal conversation looks like, is that I reveal a little bit, and then you reveal a little bit, and then we go down the sort of depth level until we get to the really deep stuff after a while of knowing each other. But this book is me saying, hey, here's the deepest things just about that happened to me in my life. And I don't know anything about you, and you don't have to give anything back to me. So that's interesting. I put my email address in the back of the book, and I received many emails from people who have finished it. And in fact, I've got one in my inbox right now that I'm just going to have a look at. And the subject line is, "You reignited my love for startups."
Oh, wow.
And so there's been some amazing, I mean, that's what the person wanted to tell me. And so there'll be people who've said that, or I don't know, like all sorts of positive things. I don't know this person, I might never meet them. But that's something quite interesting about a book. What it does is that it's a little bit like maybe public speaking or something, but it's even more remote. You just sort of send this out into the world, and it has some impact, and you don't really know. And I hope most of the impact that it has is good, for the people who do read it. But yeah, so that's been an interesting reflection in the last couple of weeks that I've been in.
Yeah, that's really true. I've found that as well. Like, I had once somebody email me or contact me on socials saying they found one of my books in a guest house and started reading it on their kind of weekend away, and how much it impacted them and changed their life. And it's this really weird thing where this indirect form of communication, and it's a book that I wrote 10 years ago. And I was like, I'm a completely different person now from 10 years ago. And now this person has picked it up, and now they have read it, and luckily it was a positive impact. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing at books, like move around. They sort of move about without your permission, without your control. Makes it really interesting. Why did you choose to self-publish? I mean, in the book, you talk a lot about having control and freedom, and not liking being told what to do, and how to show up. And even when you studied and then you dropped out, you're like, I didn't like the way it was structured, or this or whatever. There was like a bunch of reasons. And then the jobs, you don't like being told what to do. And then you self-publish a book. So there's a pattern here of saying that I will do this my damn self. But let's hear from you. Like, why did you choose the self-published route, and why did you not end up like emailing? What did the one guy say? Emailing like a Word doc to all your friends.
So yeah, I think that, I mean, to start with the character flaws, maybe I like being in control. I often think that I can do something better than other people can, even if they're experts in that domain. And I'm a perfectionist. So those are the things that sort of push me towards self-publishing. I certainly tried the publishing route, and there's a whole gamut of publishing, from the really big publishers to the sort of smaller publishers to the people who help you self-publish. There's a whole spectrum of how much you give over to someone else, to another company or another person, and how much you maintain. And ultimately, we went for the most extreme of the do-it-yourself versions. When I was engaging with the publishers and also author friends that I had who told me stories about how, they didn't get to choose the title of their book. They had a title that they wanted, but then the publisher said, no, it has to be this title. And I don't know whether that's the full story, but that's sort of what I heard. I guess that's what I wanted to share.
That happened to me as well.
Just the way that they might change what was written in the book in order to maximize sales. And I totally understand that. I mean, publishers are businesses and they are trying to maximize sales, but I was never doing this for revenue, certainly not as a South African author. You don't almost no South African authors write books because it's going to lead to a whole lot of money. And so I realized that there could be a potential conflict there where I was willing to make choices as to how long the book was, what the structure of the book was, that maybe some of the themes that were covered, then how it was printed and the quality of the print, that I might be making decisions which says, look, I'm happy to break even on this book, but the publisher wants to make money. And so I kind of was leaning towards a self-published route when I was told by someone, well, if you're going to self-publish, you may as well just email a Word document to a few of your friends because it's going to be crap. And I think that's where that really galvanized me. So, well, fine. Now I'm going to publish it myself. But also, in the sort of last year's batch of readers, one of them was Paul. So Paul and Shane and I had been the three early partners in Yuppiechef. And Paul's really wanted to be involved in the book and wanted to self-publish. And he had a lot of experience in actual print design and layout. He's been doing that type of thing since we were at school together. And so he gave a confidence that, like, that's fine. We can deal with the printers and we can deal with the layout and we'll sort that out. And then the packaging of the book, certainly when we're doing the shipping it ourselves and making a site that we'd be able to sell it for directly and doing launch events and getting it into the book retailers. Between Shane and Paul and I, we felt like we had the skills to do that and the networks to do that. And we know people across the industry and realized how privileged we are in that the average person who says, I'm going to write a book isn't necessarily able to put the money up front that's needed to get a book into the world. And then also to have the networks in it. And I think one of perhaps the biggest thing is that people are not buying the book because Andrew Smith wrote it. They're buying the book because it's about Yuppiechef. And Yuppiechef is a very strong brand. And even the subtitle, it says Handwritten, the founding story of Yuppiechef. The book actually starts when I'm 19 and it ends effectively 3 or 4 years after I leave Yuppiechef. It's my personal memoir. But the Yuppiechef brand is a strong reason for people to buy the book. And there's not a lot of authors who have that opportunity. So I think that those things put together said, let's do it ourselves. I don't know that I would want to do this very often. It's a lot of work publishing and promoting a book, but as a once-off thing, we've learned an incredible amount, and I'm glad that we went down that journey. And maybe I mentioned on my character flaws that pushed us to self-publishing, but one of the character positives is that I do enjoy the process of tackling something, figuring it out, learning it, and the sense of achievement that brings.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. I just wanted to agree. There's nobody that's writing books in South Africa for making money. Maybe Dion Meyer. I think he makes money out of books, but I think that's about it. But it's so true what you say. I was laughing just now because there's two people writing a book or in the process. There's the one who writes it, and then he gives the job of selling the book to the next guy, which is also you. So now this idiot who wrote the book is forcing you to go out on the road and be on podcasts and walk around with your boxes of books, selling them in conference centers. So that's also obviously really interesting. Got a journey. Tell me, when you were writing, it's interesting that you wrote from the journals, because normally people would write from memory or go and do research if you're a founder and you're writing the founding story. But you had your journal. So was there ever a point where you thought of something in the sort of timeline, you go back to the journal and go, I don't remember this, that it happened this way, or I remember it differently, or I think the journals are wrong. Did you find anything like that?
Yeah, it did happen. I think that the sense of time is probably the thing that surprised me the most, is that my memory of things that seemed to take a very long time, whether it was the decision to, whatever it might have been, I can't remember, but a decision to hire a particular person or move offices or open stores. In my memory, it might be that we agonized over that for months or years. And then you read in the journals, we sort of thought about it one day and decided the next day. I was like, wow, okay, that was quite brash. but it felt at the time long. And then other things, perhaps where my memory of it is that it was quick, like let's say something like profitability. And then you read in the journals that, geez, it took us 11 years to, reach profitability. I don't think I realized quite how long that was. You don't necessarily do the mental maths along the way. So possibly there's things like that the sense of time squishes when we look back on our past. We don't necessarily remember the how long things took or the order of things. It was interesting when other people read the book, even when Paul read it for the first time, and he said, I don't remember that event. I don't remember it happening like this. And I said, well, here is my handwriting from the day after where I said, yesterday, this happened. I was like, we can go with your memory or we can go with what I wrote the next day. So the journals were, because I don't have a very good memory. And so that was it. There's something, the book is not filled with literal quotes. There are quotes from the journals, but they're more, it sort of dictates the narrative and the timing of things. And, to see the range of emotions as well over things that I now think, oh, that's not such a big deal. But in the day, like, wow, I really was so emotive about this on the day. So yeah, it is something quite unique. And I'm glad that I had it. I even struggle with dialogue. You read nonfiction sort of by memoir type books where it says, they'll literally open quotes. I said this and the next person said that. And then I said this. It's like, but how do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then the author might be, no, well, I'm just kind of, that was the gist of the conversation. It's like, I can't put quotation marks around what I said or the other person said, unless I know they said it. So my book has got, literal chats or conversations that I had written down the next day. Like, I said these things, or from the very early days, we might have had an online chat to each other or something like that, Shane and I, and we've got those memorialized, but I can't make up stuff. It's just not my style of writing.
It's interesting. Like, there's a question about truth in there, the journals, because the journals are also written in. So when you read the book, for anybody that's going to read the book, and I hope everybody does, because it's really good, is that many of the journal entries are written in times of serious, like anger or fear or anguish, really, because that's normally what people journal about. You journal when you're angry or when you're sad or maybe grateful. So anyone can have a heightened emotion state, but that emotion does like color what actually happened. So do you think, were there times where you sort of now looking back and then you, with context and compassion and sort of understanding and maybe more maturity, and you look back and go, oh, I was wrong. I wrote this down on my journal. I was a complete ass, or I was just completely wrong. Anything like that happen?
There's and I try to do that in the book without taking the reader out of the story that they're in at the moment. But I did at times try and say, this is what I was feeling at the time. But now when I reflect back, I realize it's this, particularly when there's conflict between people. Like I was really crushed when this person resigned, because for me, a resignation wasn't just someone choosing to go and work in another company or maybe taking a different career path or moving to another city or another country. A resignation was a personal rejection. It was, in the moment, I felt this person doesn't want to be with me anymore. And that was my emotion in the day, which is a true emotion, but is it the truth? No, it's not true from what their intentions were or how they valued the workplace or me as a person or anything like that. And so then I do reflect a little bit in the book as I'm writing to say that's what I felt, but actually I realize now that that's not what it was. And the very end, the epilogue, sort of is a reflection on what I wrote when I was 19, which is the age that my boys are now. Well, one is 18 and one is 20, and where I write in my journals about when I'm 19. My journal when I'm 19 says basically, "What a pathetic loser." That's one of the things it says, and the sort of final paragraph is me speaking to my 19-year-old self and saying, "It's okay, and it's okay to feel like that." But I wish for you, 19-year-old self, that you could go through everything that I went through, but with a little bit less angst and a bit more peace. Now we can't do that. I can't tell my 19-year-old self to live a different life. But I think in telling my 19-year-old self that, I'm actually telling my today self hey, these next 20 years are going to be full of uncertainty and full of conflict and drama and heightened emotions. And you can't change what you're going to go through. But maybe in looking back, you've learned something so that when you go forwards, you can live each day with slightly less angst and a bit more at peace that things are going to be okay.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I wanted to ask you about that line. I think it says, I smelled burnout. I smelled burnout on the horizon or something like that. 19. That's crazy, man. Do you think, I mean, it sort of segues well into the next question I wanted to ask. Like the core sort of premise of the book was on the outside, you were telling the world how amazing Yuppiechef was, and like it's just going up and to the right and everything is awesome. But on the inside, you were really struggling. Like privately in my handwritten journals, I wrestled with the fear of failure. And then this is the story of both. Which one of those do you think is, like, on the topic of truth, which one do you think is true? Do you feel like you should have been more transparent in there, and which one did the business really need?
It's such a tricky thing. Okay, so at one of the launches, or maybe two of the launches, I told a joke, and I'm going to tell it. I mean, I'm bad at telling jokes, and I'm bad at telling jokes in front of people. So it's going to be even worse than a podcast when there's only one of you, and I think you've already heard it. But I'm going to tell it again anyway. There's a ship's captain, and and he's on the high seas in the 1600s, and he sees on the horizon a pirate ship. And the pirate ship's coming towards them. And he says to his first mate, fetch me my red shirt. And the first mate says, why do you want your red shirt? He says, well, we're going to go into battle. I know this is going to happen. And if I get cut, I don't want my people to see me bleed. So he quickly puts on the red shirt, and the pirate ship arrives, and they have this fierce battle. And he does get cut, but they survive the battle, and the pirates are beaten off, and they're okay. And everyone's celebrating, and then he turns the other way, and on the other horizon, there's 3 ships coming towards them. And he says to his first mate, fetch me my brown pants. And the audience really liked that joke at the launches. And the reason it's a really interesting joke is that, all good jokes are interesting. No, the reason that it's interesting and a joke is as a leader, do we want people to see that we've been hurt or that we're scared? But where I think the real twist is as a follower, do we want to know that our leader is scared or hurt? And this is what I don't quite understand for myself, is that I chose, this is what I don't understand the right answer to your question. I chose to be an entrepreneur. So I said, I'm going to start a business with partners, and I'm going to risk everything. If there's no money at the end of the month, I don't get paid. I'm going to put everything on the line for this. If it's take the money out of the bond of my house and, be personally liable for things. And then I'm going to ask people to come and join me on this pirate ship, is what we used to say. And I think it's one of the chapters in the book. Come join me on this pirate ship. But they didn't necessarily sign up for that same level of risk and responsibility. They came and joined with an employment contract that says, I will work and you will pay me money. And so if I arrive at work in the morning and I say, team, gather around, I've got something to tell you. I didn't sleep last night because I don't know how we're going to pay salaries at the end of this month. Sales are not what we expected, and expenses are up, and we've had all these uncertain things. And so just letting you know now, like, geez, if you've got school fees to pay, or a bond to cover, I would maybe look somewhere else, because I don't know where it's coming from. Is that true? I mean, yes, it was true. Is it helpful to say that to a team who is looking to their leader, not necessarily to lie to them, but maybe looking to the leader to buffer them from some of the risks of entrepreneurship that they didn't sign up for themselves? And I don't know. Some of the people who worked with me over those years have read the book now and said, wow, that's really eye-opening. We didn't know that's what was going on. And should I have been more honest? And in fact, the first introduction to the book also says, should the suppliers who we've asked for credit terms from, and the bank managers and the employees and the customers and our own families, should they all know what we're really going on? There isn't a good answer for it. And I didn't write the book with answers to any of those questions necessarily. I didn't say, therefore, fellow entrepreneurial leader, this is what you should do. I think the intention of the book is to say, therefore, fellow entrepreneurial leader, I empathize with your struggles. Now, I empathize with how hard it is, and also with some of these kind of moral questions of how truthful are you and how transparent are you. That's the part that isn't spoken out loud. And some of the response that I've had from people who read the book have said, I feel heard, is what one person said, and someone else said, I'm so glad it wasn't just me. So there is just I think we each going to have to decide our own level of transparency and honesty, while we're in the journey. I can reflect back on it and it's fine, but I really wrote it for other people to, for other leaders so that they feel heard and empathize, and potentially even for followers who can say, well, I look to my leader, maybe with a bit more, with a bit more grace or a bit more patience, because there's probably things that they're dealing with that I don't even understand, or they haven't chosen to reveal or to me, but let me maybe be a bit more patient with them. And but what is true?
It's massive, that struggle. Like there's a lot of tensions, that obvious tension from what it looked like on the outside, what was happening on the inside emotionally, and sort of having to, sing the songs to investors and the public and everybody else. And then on the inside, it was really rough. Hi, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, you'll definitely know that I am more than just a little bit obsessed with one question. What do I want to do with my one wild and precious life? Thank you, Mary Oliver. So from 9 to 11 October in 2026, this year, I will be hosting the very first Only the Brave retreat in Franschhoek in the Western Cape. It's 3 days, 2 nights away from noise, phones, endless stimulation and input, just to think properly about who you are, what you want, and what your next brave step might be. It's going to be really small, only about 16 people. And if this sounds like something you need, then you can find more details on my website at thisispierre.co/retreats. That is, thisispierre.co/retreats. And then there's also the question of, like, it's something that I struggle with as well. Like, at which point, when Yuppiechef, for example, or business looks really successful from the outside, it's growing and it looks like it's growing and looks like successful, but on the inside, you're like using your bond to fund it, and credit cards are maxed out, and it's like you don't know how you're going to pay school fees, or you write that bit in the book about how you couldn't afford the pediatrician. I think that was a little bit before Yuppiechef. Was that a little bit before Yuppiechef?
No, it wasn't.
It was right at the start.
No, so we
right?
started. Yeah, so my oldest son was born 2006, which is the year we started Yuppiechef. And then my second son born in 2007. And when he was turning 1, which is 2008, 2008, it was October. And so we had the Discovery's medical savings, and that had run out in October, and we didn't have any other money. So, and he wasn't sleeping, and we didn't know what was wrong. And I wrote to my journals, like, we can't afford the pediatrician. But sorry, I'm going to hijack your question to say this.
You're going to hijack my question. It's good. Go.
The struggle at that time was that I had voluntarily put myself and my family into this position, that I could have gone and got a job somewhere. At that stage, I had 10 years of experience in development, web development. I was leading a team, whatever it was. I could have gone and got a job that would have had a steady, decent salary. And it's not that, I think that what I was trying to get across was not like, oh, look at me, I've had it so hard, I couldn't pay for my son, to go to a pediatrician. Lots of people in that position. But the real thing that I kind of struggle with even now is I chose that. I chose that for myself and my family. And my boys didn't choose it, but Debbie chose to support me in that, and stay with me through those early times when we struggled that much. And they're like, was that right? And the answer is it has a little bit of hindsight in it, which is, well, it turned out okay. but it also has that is who I am, and I can't live a way different to how I am.
Yeah.
I'm glad I stayed true to who I was, because that is what success is. So maybe coming back to your question of success is, there's a success which is a financial success, and you can read about that in the public results of Yuppiechef. But what is the success? One of the successes is that I think I did what I was supposed to be doing. I think in this process, I was being the best Andrew that I could be, which involved taking on some of these risks, trying to in a relatively new industry like e-commerce, try and pioneer something new. I think that's who I am. And if I'd done anything different to that, I think that I would have been unsuccessful, even if that had looked successful.
Yeah, I think there's so much there. It's one of the questions on my original question before you hijacked it. But one of the questions I wanted to ask is like, there's this, like maybe now a dual tension, seeing that you've expanded on it, but it's this desire for what I want to do and what my family needs. And then I'm wired like this, therefore I am going to go and build this business. I'm going to try, but then the family doesn't choose that, or that life and luckily it turned out well, but for many, it does not turn out well.
Yeah.
And what is that line between, because we all admire, if you read all the, memoirs of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial journeys, and there's this admirable sacrifice and grinding it out and working from the lounge and selling, like reading Shoe Dog as well, like selling sneakers from the boot of his car and all of that. But when is it just downright irresponsible?
Yeah. Yeah. And people ask me that now as well, and they say, I've been struggling with my business for this long. When is it time to quit? And I go, I don't know. Maybe now. Maybe you should. But then you hang in there, and it turns around, and then you're so glad that you didn't. Oh, that is it's a very difficult question for sure. The only thing I would say, we talk about the family side, is that despite how hard it was to run the business, Shane and I were generally home at 5:05 every day. I generally didn't work on the weekends, and we didn't have to travel much. And I regret a little bit that I was distracted, even if I was with the family on the weekend, that I had these other pressures and thoughts in my head to some extent, but I was there. And when this recent Father's Day this year, Nathan wrote me a Father's Day card, and he kind of, obviously, because there's been a lot of focus now with the book coming out, and they feature in it in a way. And I was just aware that they didn't, like you say, they didn't choose to be in this family with a dad who was an entrepreneur, but they also now, to some extent, they're in the book and they're in the public story, whether they like it or not. And he said to me something like in the card, he said, I don't want you to have any regrets for the way that we were brought up. I think it was great, is sort of what he was saying. So I think that was pre-success. He was saying that not, well, thank goodness you sold for a lot of money. Otherwise I would never have been worth it. He was saying, despite all of that, despite everything that we went through as a family, even though they weren't even aware at the time, that you were there and you were present and you were the dad that I look up to and admire. And so I think that I would have had a lot more regrets if I had taken this path, but it had led me to be a husband or a father or a friend that I regret. And I say, well, I sacrificed all of that at the altar of sort of business or financial success. Then I would have regrets. But I don't think so. I think even if there hadn't been a financial success, because, at COVID, well, there were many times, but particularly at COVID, we thought it could all be over. And if it had ended there, but it ended in 2020, would I have said, sure, that didn't turn out the way that I had wanted, but what a way to have spent 15 years. I'm glad I did. I think so. I think it would have been tough, but I think I would have been able to say that. Would you still have written a book? Well, I did read a book about a sort of business memoir where the business didn't turn out so well. And it's tough to write a book like that. I think sort of, there's even the public story of Yuppiechef being sold is a reason that people read it. I hope I would have written a book, but maybe it just wouldn't have the same, the same appeal. But maybe. Or you might have not had the money to upfront the book. Yeah, that's true. Would have had to have that publisher. To have the publisher, begging for your 12 Rand little commission. Did Nake
Nick, did Jake and Nathan read the book?
They haven't yet. I don't think I think they've started, maybe both of them, but they haven't. And I don't understand. I think that I know that they will. But I think maybe it's a little bit close to home, perhaps. I'm not sure. Maybe a little bit awkward reading about yourself in that way. So no, they haven't, but they obviously, they know more of the story, because it's been spoken about quite a bit in the last couple of months and year, but, yeah, I'm sure they will.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like, how do you think, I mean, in the book, you talk about it. There's one little scene in the book that I really enjoyed, and I thought it's funny. And you just said something now that just reminded me of that scene again in the beginning. So after the sale happened and you signed the last things that needed signing, or I don't know, I got really confused at that part of the book. I was like, how many things do you need to sign? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't know. I don't get that process, but not that you were bad at explaining or writing about it. So I'm going, I thought it's like one thing anyway. And then you went and sat at the coffee shop and you write in the book and you still check the price. You still check the price of the thing that you're gonna order. So like reading the menu from left to right. Like so a friend of mine always says, my goal in life is to stop reading restaurant menus from left to right. Like start reading them from right to left, so I can not first check the price. And then just now, when you were explaining your writing process, you said you went to Vida Cafe and used your Discovery Miles. For your coffee after having this exit into the, I mean, in the book, I think it says like into the hundreds of millions or 400 and something, and nobody really knows. Big secret. Feels like a big secret. But how has that changed? But no, what was interesting for me is like that you haven't, it doesn't look like you've changed. Like the way I've gotten to know you as this really humble and generous and just beautiful human being. And then I see, because I obviously know a lot of founders and I see other founders that have exited and it's not quite the same as the way that you are experiencing it. And it feels like the sale or the money or the wealth or didn't affect you after, or did it? Or did your view change on it? Because money was such a big part of it in the beginning. The sort of the sort of origin of Yuppiechef was also you wanted to build a business that made money while you slept. Like so, that was the idea because you were selling time at Blue Box and at Worldwide Creative and doing internet development and web development stuff. And then you wanted to start something that would make money while you slept. So the money is a big part of the story, but it doesn't seem like the money changed you, from my perspective at least. But what does Andrew say about that?
Yeah, it's a couple of things to start. First of all, that I think some of the outward shows of money or wealth don't have much appeal for me. I went to a meeting recently, and the person I was meeting with sort of walked out together to the parking lot, and he said, "Where's your Lamborghini?" And I was like, I don't care about cars. Like, I mean, you could give me a Lamborghini and I'd probably sort of give it back. Like, I don't really care about clothes. Debbie does most of my clothes shopping for me. So I think that I go on a few holidays, but I'm not it's not like, oh, I just want to travel the world. So I think that some of the outward displays of wealth, they just don't have the same, they wouldn't have an appeal. They never did, and they probably never will. I'm not, those aren't necessarily my hobbies, I suppose. But there's something else about my story of money, and even goes to that control thing, which is when you are billing a client or getting a salary from a boss, you're still a bit they have some control over you in a way. They could stop paying. And in fact, some of our early client work, we did the work, we send the invoice, they don't pay. And that sense of like, I now can't buy something for my family because this client has chosen to not pay the bill. And, you work for an employer, but you get fired or you get, I don't know, demoted or retrenched or whatever it might be. So I think that there's something about, well, if I'm going to be in control, then I want to be in control financially. And that is very important to me. And so one of the things that's changed, we say, has the money changed me, is the things that changed is that I, day to day now, even though I'm not driving a Lamborghini, I get to engage, particularly in the work that I'm doing, without that sense of if this doesn't pay the bill right now, if this doesn't somehow look after me and my family right now, then it's not doing its job. I don't look at it that way anymore. I kind of say, I'm a bit more patient. Even Brave Hardy, which is I guess you could call it the Yuppiechef of outdoor and camping gear. Shane and I can be so much more patient with it. We said, like, it's okay. This will take time. Yuppiechef took time. We know this will take time, but we don't have to have the same level of chasing of if it doesn't work now, it's not going to work. So that's changed in me. And I get a lot of, I think, enjoyment or satisfaction out of that, more than I would if you said, here's a fancy cashmere sweater. I don't think I'd get much enjoyment out of that. But I do get enjoyment out of what money has given me now, which is a much greater choice of what I work on, where I spend my time. And yeah, I've enjoyed that for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I just admire you so much for that. Like, it's the way that you handling it in the way that is. I wanted to ask a couple of questions actually, but just about Yuppiechef, because the story is about Yuppiechef, so it'd be cool to just talk about that as well. So the story about the handwritten cards, right? So, I mean, we were Yuppiechef fans way on early. I don't know if we were one of the first 200 people. Maybe my name was on that, like on that glass in your office, because you had all the names of the first, was it the first 200 or first 100?
The first 200, yeah, which took more than a year. Yeah.
I don't know if it was, but we were fans very, very early. And I remember ordering the first time from Yuppiechef, and it arrives, and I am obsessed with things that are beautiful and design and all of that. And it arrives in this box, and then there's like striped pink paper in there, and a little magnet and a handwritten card that says, I think the first thing I bought was like a Bodum, like a French press or something, which we still have. It's lasted. and like 20 years or 15 years or whatever. And this little handwritten card that said, enjoy your French press. Thanks, Yuppiechef team, or something like that. And that's so cool, and it's so well known, that story. But did it ever feel like it became a system or became too operationalized? Like, how do you do something like that and you do it a million times and it's still authentic and still cool and still precious? Literally a million times.
Yeah, I mean, so Shane and I wanted to stop it at one point because of exactly that. We told an onboarding story to new team, not a story, but there was a whole onboarding process. But part of that was sitting with Shane and I and hearing the origin stories of Yuppiechef, because we really in leading a business, and particularly because we were a founder-led business, which I think there's something special in that, is that the founders are there to tell the origin stories, to give a why behind most things that are happening. And the organizations or things that you're involved with, or that I'm involved with, when I ask, why do we do this? And someone says, I don't know. We just have to do this. Why do I have to fill out this form before I do that? What's the dumb thing you do when you board the plane or when you at home affairs? Those things annoy me so much because you don't know why you're doing it and there's no one to tell you about it. But in a founder-led business, everyone, particularly relatively small, and everyone can kind of get to why we're doing this. So we would tell the story of founding Yuppiechef, and the first sale was to Shane's dad in August 2026, and then it was to other friends and family, and then in November there was the first sale to Denise, who we didn't know, and we said, can't just send her the box. We write a letter and we said, dear Denise, and we're trying to show her that there's people on the other side of the internet, that if something goes wrong with her order, it's not, she don't have to sit in a call center helpline or fill out a ticket online. She could speak to Andrew or Shane because they hand wrote the letter. There was a human there. It wasn't a robot that picked a product off a shelf in a warehouse. There were humans on the other side of the internet. And when we told these stories to people who joined, they got the why behind it. And everyone wrote some cards in their onboarding. And we try to get most people to write at least some cards on an ongoing basis, even though there were full-time card writers who wrote permanently, because we wanted to say, hey, everyone, this is what Yuppiechef does to show the world that there's humans on the other side of the internet. And you're writing cards because when you see a customer's name and what they bought and what they bought before, you can get a little bit of empathy into who they are, because certainly before we had physical stores, we don't get to meet our customers. But if you just look at them, you look at what they've bought, you see their history, and you say, hey, Pierre, enjoy your Bodum. Like, I hope it makes you lovely coffee. It's a way of kind of connecting in an otherwise connectionless transaction. So we would tell all those stories, and then we got to some point, I don't know when it was, maybe 2017 or 18, and we felt like maybe we were going through the motions a bit as a company. And we tried to stop writing cards because we said, like, it's not about the card. The literal card itself, we've got to have other ideas. If we're trying to achieve this thing X, there should be multiple ways of achieving X. We want to show people that there's someone on the other side of the internet, and we want our team who work here to have an empathy for who the customers are. There must be 10 ways of doing that. Let's get creative. And unfortunately, maybe we just didn't come up with something good enough to replace it, or maybe there was a bit of an internal revolt against the idea of not writing cards. We kept on going, but I think we were reaching for something there. Shane and I, we were trying to say, we must know why we're doing things. And if we know why we're doing something, you can find other ways of doing the same thing and you can keep it fresh and meaningful, even if it changes the mechanism. We did then start to stop writing some cards, particularly when we added things like subscription food, and people were buying with us every week, every second week, and you go like, "Hey, Pierre, it's your 20th time you bought from us this year." It's us again. And we would write as many cards as we could, but based on the sort of first-time buyers, big orders, registry orders, people that hadn't bought for a long time, and we'd have a number that we could write in a day, and we'd write as many as we can. And sometimes that covered everyone. But if we were going to leave someone out, it would be the people who we wrote a card last Monday. Like, it's okay. You don't need another card.
Yeah,
a week later.
You don't need another card. That's what you think.
And I think they still write cards. I don't know. I think it's continued, and I hope the stories are told as to why this has all started. Because without a why, things certainly lose their heart.
Yeah. What was the most fun thing for you to build? You're a builder. I got to know you. What was the most fun thing for you to build in Yuppiechef?
Yeah, roughly speaking, near the end, Shane focused on the product range, the brand, the physical stores, the marketing. But even within marketing, I did some of the sort of oversaw some of the digital marketing. It was more, how do we represent this brand to the world? And I really enjoyed the store openings. I remember, with the Willowbridge, which was the first store, and the process super stressful. I don't know if I could say I enjoyed it, but it was very, very memorable. And Joburg and a whole team of us went up because we opened Sandton City and Mall of Africa on the same day. And so that was really enjoyable. But I think that physical manifestation in the stores and in the brand itself was where Shane got a lot of his satisfaction. I think my satisfaction was more operations, tech, and finance, and particularly the way that those things work together. Sort of in the last, whatever it might have been, 5 years or so, we were getting up to thousands of orders a day are going through the warehouse with a custom handwritten card that was written somewhere else. There's people sitting in a room somewhere that write a card, and it ends up getting into a box, and every order that day that was ordered before 2 p.m. was, shipped on the same day. And how that all came together. And just like self-publishing, we wrote all of our own warehouse management software that integrated with the website and the customer service and the stores and the omni-channel part, where you can go into a store and you can buy two things. One of them you take with you. The other one they don't have in that store, but they say they're going to deliver it to your house. And, a few minutes later, it's being packed in the warehouse in Cape Town and given to the courier. And that machine, and we had conveyor belts, but we had sky rails. So there's things that sort of moved around the warehouse with hooks on that you would pick things into like a shopping basket that you'd have at Checkers and put it on the sky rail, and then it would be taken to the back where someone would take it off and pack the orders. And the kind of the magic of all that coming together was a lot of fun. Because we're doing Brave Hardy now, which is just going really well and it's growing, but it's like a handful of orders. There's most days we don't get into double figures, and I'm kind of, I guess, I'm kind of enjoying that it's small, and I'm enjoying the size of it. But there is something which I'm sort of jealous of the problems that you can solve when you reach a scale where things are quite complex and technical and hand built. There's a lot of satisfaction in that.
Yeah, I can imagine. That was really cool. It's really interesting. Like in the beginning of the book, you're like e-commerce. And in the end, you go, okay, no, bricks and mortar. Yeah. And then sort of smashing the two together. So, how did that process, I wanted to ask you, like, that pivoting of a strategy, how did that go? And at which point did you go, screw, like we can't be doing this anymore. We need to do this now.
Mm.
And is there some, I don't know, some sort of admittance of we made a mistake or we need to pivot, or what does that actually look like on the ground or in the thick of it?
Yeah. Look, I think that, I mean, it might be a bit harsh to say we made a mistake, because I think if we hadn't believed as strongly in e-commerce as we did, we wouldn't have stuck with it. And we wouldn't have done what the other bigger retailers had decided was not going to work or was too hard. Like the contrarian narrative we told ourselves, which I remember, I think it was a line from someone else, but I remember Paul saying, in 10 years' time, nobody will go to a physical store for a product that they know where to go buy online. And I can't remember what year he said that, but it was way more than 10 years ago. And I've been to a physical store this week. So the prediction is wrong, that e-commerce will take over in the same way that e-commerce is not nobody, but almost nobody goes to a physical travel agent. You don't go to a physical bank branch. You don't post a letter, not in South Africa. There's certain digital transformations in travel, online travel, in internet banking, in email. There's certain digital transformations that once you've tried it once, you go, well, I'm never going back. I'm not going to, why would I fax something when I can email a PDF? You never go back. But people shop online and they go, oh, that's quite nice, but I'm still going to go back to the physical store. And so I think the mistake that we made was not that e-commerce isn't going to work. E-commerce is clearly working. I think the mistake that we made early on is saying it will only be e-commerce in the future. And we perhaps missed some of the reasons that people shop, that they will continue to shop. And some of those reasons are things like immediacy. Like I need it right now. I'm driving past the place on my way to someone's birthday and I just need to buy the gift. I forgot. As much as Checkers 60 and everything is making it quicker, there's something that can't work for every product everywhere. There's something about the selection process, that looking at things on the screen, I mean, how many pictures and text and writing and everything. Sometimes you want to choose in real life. Sometimes you don't know what you want. And searching and finding things online is just quite hard compared to standing in a store, particularly looking for beautiful things. Standing in a store and just casting your eye over and going, wow, that catches my attention. It's very difficult to ever do that online. So I think that we were wrong in thinking that e-commerce was going to win and physical retail was going to lose, like the fax machine has lost. But what it did, being all in on e-commerce for 11 years, gave us a head start in e-commerce, and it also gave us a really solid foundation of systems and the way that we integrated things together, that when we did open physical stores, we were able to do our physical stores in a way that the traditional retailers weren't able to sort of retrofit. And it comes down to some quite interesting things, like we didn't pay commissions to sales assistants on the store floor. That most physical retail exists with each store being a bit of an island, really, if you go back 50 years. And that's how they've always operated. This store, we need to incentivize in its isolation, and we need to incentivize each sales agent for what they sell. But in a Yuppiechef context, where what exists on that one shop floor is only a fraction of the full range, and you want to help people set up wedding registries and send gifts to other people that will be delivered from the warehouse, and redeem vouchers that were bought at another place. And it's a lot more complicated than just walk in and make the single sale. So we had created a much more single retailer idea. Yuppiechef stores, online, email, phones, everything all together. That was very difficult for other stores to retrofit. So I think the experience of walking into a physical Yuppiechef store was a better experience because we had started online than it was the physical stores that existed like that in a long format, but they couldn't retrofit back like we could. And so I think that it was, you could maybe call it a mistake. Maybe it was just a boldness in backing e-commerce longer than perhaps we should have, but it ended up being very effective and very powerful to do it that way around.
Yeah, I can imagine, because in the book, Yuppiechef, it feels like it really took off. It became profitable once the physical stores opened. But it was only, and a big part of it, and I think you're right, it's true when you're talking about it now, is that it was built on the backbone of the e-commerce and that sort of efficiency and the systems and everything that you've built, like with your sky rails. I would have loved to see those sky rails. That's freaking awesome. I really love that. I wanted to ask you as well, at the exit, right? So you described the exit quite, like very truthfully in the book. And what was your expectation? What did you think was going to happen once Mr. Price bought you guys, and now what did you think was going to happen after the sale versus what actually happened?
So let me just go back a little bit, because it's a question that a lot of people have. Is they'll ask something like, did you make the right decision in selling Yuppiechef? Some version of that question. And what I have to remind people is that we took venture capital investment in 2011 and 2013 from Tiger Global US hedge fund, and nobody gives you a company millions of dollars in exchange for equity if they don't expect a return. And there's only two types of returns that investors are going to have. They're going to get dividends, and we were never really a dividend returning company because we were putting any free cash we had back into stock and then eventually stores. And so that's not the type of return that they were looking for. And so the other return is that they sell their equity. And who are they going to sell their equity to in 3 or 5 or 7, 10 years time? They're going to sell it to someone who's going to buy the whole company, or someone who's going to maybe be a later stage private equity or venture capital fund who's going to kind of get it ready for that sale. That the decision to sell the Yuppiechef in 2021 was actually made in 2011. If we didn't want to ever sell the company, we shouldn't have taken outside investor money. It should have just been Paul and Shane and I, and we could have grown a lot slower, and maybe we wouldn't have made it, but we would then be able to keep running it however we wanted to into the future. So that's an important caveat. When Tiger sort of maybe the unkind thing would be gave up on us in about 2018. They wanted out. They were sort of finished with their South African investments, and so we found. It's a bit more to the story, but we found a new investor, Sam, to come and buy Tiger shares. And Sam says, I will buy their shares, but we are selling the company in 5 years' time. And this was 2018. So that would have been 2023. And we actually ended up being earlier than that. But again, it was like, we're doing this, we're setting it up for a sale. So then COVID comes in 2020, and we see how a small, we were big at that time. We made, 200-300 people, 7 or 8 stores, profitable, in the hundreds of millions of turnover. And yet when COVID comes and we have to close our doors on the 27th of March, we can't sell in our stores, we can't sell online, we pretty much hit a wall. And when we're sailing so close to the wind the whole time, putting every cent that we have back into store, in fact, more than every cent we have, including borrowing some money from the shareholders, even at that late stage, 2021, that a few days of not trading, and then that turned into sort of maybe 2 weeks of not trading, meant that I thought it was all over. I thought that we would have to just close the doors or sell the company for R1 or whatever it was. And I think that those things together said, Yuppiechef needs to have a long-term home. It needs to have a place where it will live on beyond me or Shane or any one employee, because what we've built is bigger than us and too important to have something like COVID knock it out. And so I think that if you put all of that framing together and you say, what was your expectations? One of my expectations was Yuppiechef finds a home that it can be in forever. And it has found that. Mr. Price is a big retailer. They are not going anywhere. They've helped Yuppiechef grow from, I think maybe we were 8 or 9 stores when we left, and there's now something like 25 stores. They've got so much experience in logistics and physical retail stores and import and finance and governance and everything else like that Yuppiechef is more likely to be around in 5 or 10 years' time than it was under our leadership. So in that way, it's met our expectations. It didn't meet my expectations in being a place where I was super excited and engaged and wanting to keep going indefinitely. Shane and I, when we sort of became employees within the Mr. Price Group, I thought it would be quite a long time. I thought that there would be exciting things that we could still do, and it was interesting how psychologically quickly that changed for me. That I realized, kind of going back to what we said earlier, I had no idea this was going to happen in advance. In fact, I was super optimistic. I have a journal entry where I says, we found the perfect acquirer for Yuppiechef. So it wasn't that suddenly on day one, Mr. Price changed their tune or the people we were reporting to were suddenly terrible people. It wasn't any of that. It was mostly me realizing, oh, wow, I'm actually not suited to an environment where, going back to what we spoke about earlier, where I'm having to do things and I don't even know why. And worse than that, I have to tell the people who are following me why we're doing something. And there were certain policies that got handed down that maybe there was a good reason. I just didn't know the reasons. And I have to tell our team, this is what we're doing. I think it was something to do with COVID and the Christmas celebrations. And they said, why? And I said, I don't know. It's just an instruction I've been given. And so there was that. And then there's also just the sort of what makes me come alive. And it's wonderful when you have this big company with this massive balance sheet and war chest of cash behind you. And you go, wow, that's great. We know we're not going to run out of money anymore. And then you go, but hang on, that was the challenge. Like that was the game. If you take that away, then what is this for? What is this about? And so I think that the handing the leadership of the company over to people, a leader and multiple people who are able to continue running Yuppiechef in a way that suits its current environment was the best thing that we could do for certainly for ourselves, but then also for the rest of the team and the longevity of the company. So yeah, we stayed a lot quicker. I think we resigned after 9 months. Left off. Well, we handed in our resignation after 9 months. Left after a year, so pretty much exactly a year after the sale of Yuppiechef, and walked away quite entirely. I don't know what the right word is, but I don't really keep up to date with the company. A lot of the people who I worked with there have also moved on, and so I'm not very connected to how it runs, how it operates, and that was a bit different to what I expected. I think, I guess it was interesting, even in the process of leaving, realized how many services and things I'd signed up with my Yuppiechef email address, because 15 years ago, you don't imagine that I'm always going to be Andrew at yuppiechef.com. Like that's never going to change. Yeah. And then kind of realizing, oh, wow, there can be this world where my identity and Yuppiechef are no longer the same thing. And that there's all sorts of things that happened since me leaving, but that kind of separating of who I am, my identity. And even now, I mean, I haven't worked there for 4 years. Yeah. The sale was 5 years ago. And when people say, oh, what do you do? It's quite hard to not say, something like Yuppiechef. I'm the founder, or I was the founder, because it's so much a part of it. It was such an obvious thing to say I was. And now I have to say that I wasn't. But when I don't say, I was one of the founders of Yuppiechef, and then people find it out, they go like, why didn't you say that? You're saying these other things that you're involved in, like, but that's who you are. And it almost feels disingenuous to not claim that as part of my identity. So anyway, those have been some of the things I've grappled with since then.
Yeah, I can imagine. And there was this line, I think I said to you before we started recording, where it was the reports announcement, and the Mr. Price report was all numbers and nothing about how amazing your sky rails were, or the spreadsheets that you built, or the integrated omni-channel experience. And I can imagine, I mean, you don't have to respond if you don't want to, but I can imagine the Andrew that wants control and the Andrew that wants to build, it just doesn't fit within that world. Not that world is wrong. That's the way that they run their business, and there's a way that you run it. But it's almost like a little bit of a mismatch there from my perspective. And that little bit in the book is at the end of one of the chapters, was really sad for me when I read that. And I was like, oh, poor Andrew. He worked so hard on his sky rails, and now all they seem to care about is the numbers. Although I don't suppose that's 100% true. But yeah.
I have a few sort of psychological tricks that I play on myself. And the one is when I was in matric, I was in a play at school, and there were 3 nights of it. And on the last night, there's the sort of standing ovation. I think, at least in my memory, there was. And then there's a little party backstage, and then it's over. It ends. And I can think back on it for what it was, but it's not. Things that are successful don't have to carry on forever. And so what I try and the next year, or in fact, I was in a play. I was in Joseph in grade 11, and 25 years later, I went back to school and they were putting Joseph on again. And I think it was much better than our version of it. But it was like the Yuppiechef of today is different to the Yuppiechef of in my lounge in 2006. It's different to the sort of 2011 exciting times we've just taken Tiger Investment. It's different to 2017 when we're opening our first store, when we go to Joburg, or when we're surviving with COVID. Like those can be almost different things that each exist in their own way. And I was involved in a whole chunk of them, the whole first chunk of them. And now there will be a whole nother chunk of them. And you're right, they might have different focuses, and it might be, the emphasis could be on different things. Certainly when they put numbers out to the world, that investors do care about the rands and cents of it. And I have to tell myself, this is okay. It's okay that it was what it was when I was there, and now it's something different. And that doesn't mean that it's any of those things are all right or wrong. But yes, it can be hard.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, and also I was reading, I don't remember where it was, I think Martin Shaw's new book, where he writes about how in the West we really have trouble with things ending. Specifically with, he writes about death specifically, but with things ending, we don't like that. We don't want everything to continue forever and just keep growing and just be the way that it was always and just be awesome. So, but I think that's a useful reflection. To kind of round up and finish our conversation, what is if there's anything that you could name, maybe one or two things that was the highest high, like the best thing that happened, and anything that was like the lowest, or even a regret that you have in the journey of Yuppiechef?
It's there's a couple of times where I write, certainly in my journals, and then I try and sort of reflect in the book, even though I know that it's a repetition. It's like, this was the greatest day because you maybe constantly have them. So there were a few in the moment that felt like the greatest day that then they were surpassed by other days. I think some of the highest highs were the opening of the stores, which seems crazy because Yuppiechef's known as an e-commerce company, but I think it was the coming together of everything. And there was that, like so many other things, we pretty much did the stores ourselves. We did get a shop fitting company to help manufacture stuff, but we designed most of the design ourselves. We built our own point of sale system. The way that it integrated, we hired the team members and amazing teams in those early stores and trained them up and figured out how we're going to do things. So the kind of coming together of everything we had learned in this sort of one physical representation that was very tangible. So I think I'd say that there were a couple of, there were earlier highs, like when we were in New York for the investor conference, and these, this New York hedge fund had given money to this tiny little South African e-commerce startup, and we felt on top of the world at them. So those were some of the highs. The lows were, there were a lot of low moments, often to do with people. We had a couple of thefts, and I remember one in particular. I didn't write about it in the book, but there was someone internally stole from us, and having to deal with that and having to speak to the rest of the team and just grappling with what the right response would be, but also the sense of betrayal. It's kind of the popping of the bubble of we're this family that is together through everything. And yet I told the story when I was to the team at the time. I said, I remember stealing some coins from my parents when I had this little money jar, and I stole some coins, and I was running down the passage, and my dad caught me, and I didn't get kicked out of the family. I'm still part of the family, but the realization that a company is not a family. We want it to be a family. We wanted to feel like this place we belong to, but the person who stole from us no longer worked for us after that. It's like a family, but it's not a family. And I think that some of the lows were where I was grappling with some of those things, where these people are resigning, they're choosing not to work here, or they steal from me, or they, whatever it might be. And just the complexity of human relationships, and that I'm doing my best as a leader, but often people are still feeling disappointed or let down, or they feel like they've missed out on a promotion, or they should have got a raise, and grappling with that was by far the hardest things that I ever dealt with, was all those internal things. Almost when COVID came And we had this crisis moment where we had to figure out how we're going to cope with initially no sales and then lots of sales. Those were really difficult times, but it's almost like, well, that's when we rally together and we solve these problems together, and we pull up our sleeves and you work flipping hard when Cyril's announcing at 9 p.m. on a Sunday night that we can sell alcohol, or we can't sell pots, or whatever it might be. We're all together in that. But the lowest moments were where it feels like we're not together, where there's some fragmentation. And as one of the leaders with Shane, the leader, figuring out like how to navigate that was really difficult, because partly my own flaws. I like being liked. I like people liking me. And that's not always possible in a leadership positions. Yeah, those are my growing moments for sure.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable in that. Just like the whole book, such a vulnerable act. It's an act of courage. What is one thing you're definitely not going to do in Brave Hardy? We're not making that mistake again.
Handwriting cards.
Handwriting cards.
That's a silly idea. Who would do that?
I love that. Not ever handwriting cards again. That's awesome.
We want to try and do other things that are meaningful, but no, we don't handwriting cards. That's too hard.
Hilarious.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think that I tell myself in Brave Hardy that whatever it might be, we don't want a very big team, or we don't want lots of stores, and it's almost inevitable that will happen. So I don't think I'm going to say there's specific things that we will or we won't do. I think I'm trying with Brave Hardy. The thing that I won't do is feel like if I don't rush, if we don't grab this land, like we felt like in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, like there was this e-commerce land grab. And if we don't get there right now, today, then it's all going to be over for us. And I think what I've kind of learned in that is like, you know what? There's not so much of a rush. It will be okay. The business will succeed or fail based on other things than just your own sense of anxiety or panic. Like, just keep going, just keep being patient. And even if someone tries to copy you, or even if someone else, or Amazon or Takealot or whatever, like, don't worry about those things. Just stick with who you are. Try not to think that if it doesn't happen today, it's all over. That's something I'm doing my best with.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with me, Andrew. We can keep on talking forever. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. Just one last little thing, like, where can people find the book? In which bookstores?
So handwrittenbook.com. You can buy it directly from us, and it comes beautifully packaged, thanks to Shane and Paul, and signed. You can also buy it in Exclusive Books and I think a few other bookstores. And depending on when people listen to this, there will be other places that you can buy it. But either of those places. And I'm not particularly active on many other channels. So LinkedIn, maybe you can find me. But handwrittenbook.com is the place to go.
Cool. That's awesome. And bravehardy.com is the new one.
Brave Hardy, for all your camping outdoor gear. Just a disclaimer. I actually had to help someone in the shop this morning because everyone else was out. And I was like, listen, I don't really camp. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just the admin guy. But I did. I made a sale. I somehow made it. So, because Shane is the product guy and I am the non-product guy. But I'm really excited about Brave Hardy and where it's going.
That's really awesome. Where's the store for everybody that wants to know the store, like in inverted commas?
It's a very small store that's part of our office in Westlake in Cape Town, but predominantly online as well. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So if you want to meet Andrew, you can go to the store. When are your shifts?
My shifts when everyone else is out. That's when
everyone else is out. That's hilarious. Well, thank you so much for joining me, man. It's been great as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pierre. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Thanks for the chat.
So, thank you for listening or watching, and thank you for being on this journey with me as we try and figure out and find our way through the fog of life and work. So I've been writing a really short little daily letter that comes out each weekday, and literally very short. It's less than 50 words, and it is a burst of inspiration with some thoughts on strategy, how to find your way, how to become a better human being and do work that matters. You can go to thisispierre.co/daily letter to sign up and become a part of this community and hear about all the things that we get up to firsthand. Thank you for being a part.